Okay. Good morning. Welcome to Data Talks Live. I'm Dr. Tom Weiss. I'm just going to go through what I'm reading today and what I'm interested in related to data, talk about it from my point of view, given my kind of background in industry and academia, and that's it. So today I'm reading an article in the Center Square by Shirlene Guerra. What are data centers and why do they matter? So I guess my point of view on data centers is necessary for kind of storing the massive amounts of data that we're producing as a society now. I think, folks have this impression like a data center is this ethereal, nebulous thing, but really what it is just a collection of servers. A server is just a big computer with a lot of processing power. It isn't really functionally different from the desktop PCs that many folks have had. I've hosted servers on my own computer many times, and a data center functionally really isn't much different than that. The difference is the scale and how it's optimized for kind of use in the cloud. It is the cloud, in effect, over the web for people to store their data. So the other thing that's been notable lately is it's got huge power consumption needs, which, from what I've read, the U.S., at least the U.S. electric grid, and probably more broadly globally, is not kind of set up and well equipped to accommodate. We just don't have the electric generating capacity to accommodate what they anticipate is the need for data centers to quote unquote power the AI transition. But according to this article, research from Synergy Research Group shows the number of quote hyperscale, I don't know what that term means, data centers worldwide doubled in just 5 years, reaching 1,136 by the end of 2024. The U.S. now accounts for 54% of the total capacity, more than China and Europe combined. Northern Virginia and Beijing metro area together make up 20% of the global market. So I think that's a big AI enabler, an indicator for, what nations or geographic regions are kind of more AI ready. That's good. Kind of logistics, strategic positioning for the U.S. to be a leader in the AI market. I'm not going to claim that's good or bad. It just seems to be that the U.S. is well set up, and I think a lot of that has had to do with not just AI, but the kind of explosive growth of cloud infrastructure use in the U.S. over, let's say, the last 10 to 15 years. If you look at the earnings statements for Amazon, Google, Microsoft for their cloud services, there's just been explosive growth in those areas with folks seeking to migrate their data storage to the cloud. And data storage isn't just your photos. Industrial service providers, utilities, for example, can generate massive amounts of data just based on their operations, right? Transportation, GPS data. So things that are generating multiple data points per second, which were traditionally stored kind of quote on site wherever the industrial activity was taking place, are now in the process of cloud migration because there's lower in theory lower maintenance costs, though those maintenance contracts can get pretty expensive, and better infrastructure. So the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, is going to function more seamlessly, and you don't need to have your own in-house maintenance team to essentially have a mini data center, which is probably not using the latest hardware, physically located on site. So, the other thing is, excuse me, you buy access to computing resources in the cloud only when you need them, and you only pay for what you use. I think a word of caution there. Once the big cloud providers have sort of pushed out the on-site cloud storage, and the kind of expertise has gone out of the general marketplace, I mean, they can really raise the price to whatever they want. And they're only really competing with each other. So they get into this place where they're in like a strategic price parity, where instead of everybody competing on price to lower price, what you could see is folks competing, to maintain parity with everybody else. So, Google raises their price by whatever it is, $1, and then rather than Microsoft and Amazon lowering their price, they raise their price by $1. So instead of competing for customers by lowering prices, they're trying to stay in parity with the other major competitors. So basically, a small number of companies will control the price. That's really not how capitalism's supposed to work. Capitalism's supposed to be, two hardware stores in the same town. He sells a hammer for $1 and I sell it for 95 cents. So now I've got to lower my price to 94. So kind of, when you have that kind of market dominance of a few companies, it's not good. That's kind of why societies have sought to rein in the power of monopolies. Anyway, that was a major tangent, but this is live. So a data center is like a library of server computers that both stores and processes a lot of internet cloud data that we use every day. That was director of the Power and Energy Center at Virginia Tech, Dr. Ali Mehrizi Sani. Imagine having thousands of high-performance computers working non-stop, doing heavy calculations with their fans on. That will need a lot of power. Correct. I didn't mention Meta. But all those companies are going to have footprints large enough to be measured in megawatts. And Synergy's analysis shows how dominant the U.S. has become. 14 of the world's top 20 hyperscale data center markets are in the U.S., including Northern Virginia, Dallas, Silicon Valley, and other hotspots like the Greater Beijing. Other global hotspots include Greater Beijing, Dublin, and Singapore. Amazon, here we go, alluding to what I was saying before. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google account for 59% of hyperscale capacity, followed by Meta, Apple, and companies such as Alibaba. I really don't see Apple as much of a competitor in this space. They just don't seem like they're vying for market share in the AI space as aggressively as their competitors. I mean, if you put the new iPhone side by side with the new Samsung phone, you will see a major difference in the AI capabilities. Apple is kind of just doing the same thing they've always been doing. Every year they put out a phone with a better camera and maybe a new color, and maybe they sharpen up the battery life by 5%. But the new Pixel phones and Samsung phones have really, seems invested heavily in AI and AI capabilities, and it's pretty fun to play with if you have some time to, and you have the ability to grab one of those phones and play around with some of those AI capabilities. I know Apple's got that monopoly on the blue message, which is what holds their whole brand together, basically, at this point. So I doubt we'll see a mass exodus from that to move over to Android phones anytime soon, unless And I know that that's changing now. I know that there are new ways that, folks who use SMS can interact with, um, iMessage users. I'm not an expert in that, so I don't want to talk too much about it. Okay, that's enough from that article. Next one, I'm going to look at New York Times. Okay, I'll have to log in, get it through the university. EPA to stop collecting emissions data from polluters. Yeah, there's been a lot of that lately. A lot of government websites in the US have been dropping or removing literature around quote unquote woke topics. So it seems like there's been a systematic purge of government websites that put out data related to the environment, related to diversity and equity. I think anything that the current administration deems as woke is being systematically removed. The data from thousands of coal burning power plants, oil refineries, steel mills, and other industrial facilities is the country's most comprehensive way to track greenhouse gases. So this article is by Maxine Joslow. I'm not good with names, guys, so if I'm butchering people's names, I apologize. But it's funny, I've personally used this data set for research that I have done or been interested in doing before, so I may have to go and, is it too late to stop collecting emissions data? Okay. Well, I might have to grab what data's up there now before they take it down entirely. The EPA proposal would end requirements for thousands of coal-burning power plants, oil refineries, steel mills, and other industrial facilities across the country. The government has been collecting this data since 2010, and it is a key tool to track carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases that are driving climate change. Great. The Friday announcement followed months of effort by the Trump administration to systematically erase mentions of climate change from government websites while slashing federal funding for research on global warming. Okay, yeah. As someone who has applied for federal grants before, I can tell you a lot of those grants are going away. And there's like lists of words floating around that you have to avoid. If there's anything related to climate, sustainability, basically what the quote unquote research grant consultants are saying is take those words out. The US federal government's not going to accept a grant with those words in it. Okay. I'm looking at another article, Computer World. Matt Egan. This is kind of what I do every day, guys. I do this on my own, whether I record it or not. I'm just looking for kind of the topics of the day related to data. That way I can keep up to date, pass information that's contemporary along to my students. So, in a recent episode of the First Person Podcast, I guess that's Computer World, met with Magan Naidu, Chief Data Office. It says Chief Data Office. I think they mean Chief Data Officer of the World Food Council. Told us of his pride in building a future-proof data organization to help solve world hunger. Okay, so I think this is maybe a little bit of a advertisement for that company. I'm not going to really dive too deep into that. 100 million Bitcoin? Nah. So one thing I was reading this morning related to this thing called vibe coding. I think that was in TechCrunch. When I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I read news on my phone like I shouldn't, instead of trying to go back to sleep. But yeah. So I was reading this concept vibe coding. So basically what it is, traditional coders would they code. But vibe coding is like you make a series of prompts and you put them into AI, and then you sort of just ask AI like, create a program that does this, and then you get an output, and the output is sort of what you like, but not really. So then you iterate. So now you tell AI, no, that's not quite right. Change this, change that, and you improve the code a little bit. You run it, and then you probably make some manual tweaks to it to get it to do what you want. Supposedly, it's maximizing productivity for software engineers. I can tell you, as someone who has done it both ways, AI code is far from perfect at this point. And it has its limitations. I do it for machine learning. I'll go through maybe some of those limitations in more detail. For now, I have to go get my kids on the bus. So I'm liking this format. I think we'll do more of this. Anyway, this has been Data Talks Live. I'm Dr. Tom. Talk soon.